Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to another self-care Sunday with Tiffany. And today I'm going to be talking all about eczema. This is a topic that is very close to my heart because my own daughter actually, Thea, actually has a history of eczema coming from her family history. And then the other thing is that I often get asked about this in clinic and also amongst friends. Well, if you know, right, when it comes to naturopaths, there aren't, many times where people come to us as, the first step. Usually for whatever conditions that they're suffering from, they've typically already gone to see, a allopathic doctor, and then maybe even track TCM. And if they still cannot resolve their issue, then they might somehow come and knock on the door of a naturopath such as myself. And yeah, I would say eczema is one of those things that is common enough, and I guess quite distressing enough that people do really want to seek a remedy for it. So here we are today talking a bit more about this condition and what you can do beyond, slapping on some. So on that note, let me just start the presentation. Okay, so I would just like to share perhaps a little bit about myself for those of you who are unfamiliar or like perhaps joining us for the first time today, like who am I and why am I doing this series, this show, right? Okay, so I'm Tiffany. I'm a Australian trained naturopath, nutritionist and herbalist. And then a few years ago, I also trained in mindfulness, specifically in mindful eating. So as you can see, here is an array of my different past experiences from working with renowned chefs like 𝗲𝗏 Robuchon to hosting a lot of these workshops and retreats in corporate type places, and of course doing lots and lots of consults in my own private practice. Yeah. Okay, so then I thought like the important thing to highlight here is also what are some guiding principles, for us naturopaths, which is very important because these are some of the themes that I will continue to bring up later on in the show. So first of all, I'd just like to stress that if possible, we always do no harm. And then beyond treating the condition that our clients come in for, we also look at the root causes of what are some of the things that might have contributed to the actual condition. So what we're trying to do is to treat the person not just as a quick fix, a symptomatic relief, but by addressing the underlying imbalances, we can hopefully bring about a more long-term resolution to the condition. Yeah, and then we believe in the healing power of nature, so we use typically like natural remedies and tools that typically will do less harm, and then doctor as teacher. So this is all about empowerment of our clients, such that exactly like through workshops, through sharing like these that I'm doing today, right, that we are able to again educate our clients, potential clients, so that they can make informed choices for themselves. Yeah. And then treating the whole person. So what we mean by this is you are not coming through the door as just a symptom. You're not a disease, right? You are a whole person with mind, body, and spirit. So when we look at treating you, we also look at treating the entire the whole aspect of you, not just the condition you come in for. Yeah. And then finally, of course, prevention is a key component. So which is why we are doing, I'm doing the show today as well, so that you kind of like can make good choices right from the start, so that you might not actually have to deal with the consequences later. Yeah. Okay, so on that note, let me get to today's topic. So we talk about eczema, which yes, typically is thought of as a skin condition. The thing is that with eczema though, right, it's not just something that you have to deal with on the skin, because the repercussions, right, can be quite severe. And for example, like in this diagram that I show here, it could start with, fairly mild symptoms like itching, like, so, which leads you to scratch, and then that might lead to open sores, and even disturbed sleep if the itch gets, quite severe. And then from there, you would see that it peters on to, depending on the severity of the condition, and how long it's been kind of like affecting you, it can actually lead to more and more serious, side effects, taking a toll even on your mental and emotional well-being, and yeah, when I was actually doing research for this particular episode on eczema and skin issues, right, that there are people apparently who has really gone to the point of like being suicidal because they just do not seem to be able to find any real solution, and their skin is just getting worse and worse. And of course that really takes a toll on the emotional aspect, because they have to go out into the real world and face, right, people with their skin. So it actually can start off as quite a mild issue and then really becomes quite severe. And I would say this is especially so for parents like myself with children with, like it can even start in infancy, right, with babies, right, who start to have eczema. And it is very distressing for a parent to watch your child scratching at themselves uncontrollably, especially when they're sleeping. And I can understand that the reason why a lot of people might just straight away get onto the steroid creams is because exactly you can't stand the discomfort of seeing your child suffer, and you would just do anything to just quell it, and that kind of like starts that journey, right, with the topical steroids, right? So I'm here to share today what are some of the things that could happen if you start going down that path. And like for example, sometimes people might not know that there are actually other options, right? So they might just think that the steroids, the topical steroids is the way to go. So the reason I'm here today is not to kind of like say that don't use steroids, but rather I'm here to present the other alternatives. And then knowing these options, right, my mother always says life is all about making choices. So to make the right choice for yourself, for your family, your children, right, first of all, I think it is important or crucial that you know what are your options, so that you can make an informed choice, right, knowing that, oh, okay, there's this few different things that you can actually do beyond going straight for the steroids. Because I would say, whilst there is a place for them, but is it really your kind of like first step, before trying anything else? Like do you necessarily need to dive straight onto that path, right? So kind of like that's the reason why I wanted to do today's show, to just plant that little seed. So I always say with any of my shows that my way is not the only way. Rather take it with a pinch of salt, based on today's information, do a little bit more of your own research, and then ultimately you can decide whatever works best for you, for your family. Okay, so on this note, I thought I would just even for people who have not started to use steroids, like what are some things to consider when if you do want to go down that path. So is it a skin deep kind of healing? Because I would say that when you first start using it, it is very effective in the sense that you do get the healing quite rapidly, which is why I can see the allure of using these steroids, right? So yes, they are usually used as the first line of therapy for treating eczema. And I would say, I just wanted to highlight here, right, that the main benefit of using steroids is that they do very quickly reduce inflammation, making the skin less red, itchy, and sore, which of course is kind of like the remedy that a lot of people who turn to steroids is looking for, right? Especially for young children who can't control scratching, right? It's like that is sort of like what it is meant to do. And I think at the beginning it does fix the solution very quickly. And then it says here, however, to be successful, steroids are not meant to be just like a quick fix, but rather it should be used in a conjunction with other treatments, for example, using moisturizers to keep the skin hydrated, and then to protect the skin, and using like a little like less harsh soap substitutes to cleanse the area that is affected. Yeah, but one thing I wanted to highlight is if you look at all these things that has been mentioned, right, from reducing inflammation to reducing the redness, itchiness, or keeping the skin clean, ultimately, right, it is all topical things that we are talking about. So we are still looking at eczema, from a very superficial, literally, right, no pun intended, really from a very superficial level. It's like it is just talking about the surface of the skin. Yeah, we haven't gone into anything with regards to how it's actually helping the body internally. Yeah, so that is something that I just wanted to point out. Okay, and then well, when it comes to steroids, I'm sorry if you can't see this. I'll just read it out. That there is also like different classes of steroids. Okay, so from something that is considered very low in potency to like super potent. And well, the I would say the irony is that those that are for low doses and those that are considered safe for children, for infants to use, right, are those that are actually best used on thin skin, right? So what do we mean by thin skin? So for example, the face, the groin areas, axilla, which is like the armpit. So like in these areas where the skin is very thin, that is when it is most effective. And it's actually this under this categorization, right? It's actually said that it's not so effective on thicker skin. So thicker skin are the skin, like for example, on your legs, on your arms. So unfortunately, these areas are also places where eczema quite often, occurs. So what that means is that basically, like that low potency of steroids, which is considered relatively safe to use, especially on children, is not really effective. Yeah, if your eczema happens to be on your legs and arms, that means you have to move on to the next level of potency. So do you see? It's like basically, what is considered safest might not actually work. Yeah, so it kind of like starts that slippery slope into going into the levels of potency that are higher and higher. And of course, with that, there starts to come some of these side effects that are usually mentioned in relation to steroid use. Okay. And then here you would see there was this study that is done called this More Than Skin Deep patient report, which actually included hundreds of participants asking about their experience with eczema, how it affects their lives, and then whether whatever treatments they are seeking, 90% of which are using your topical steroids, whether it is proven to be effective. And to be honest, from the report, you can see the link here. So don't take my word for it. Go and look at the report. The findings show that in fact, a good 80% of the participants say that whatever treatments that they are using, the orthodox treatments, unfortunately, does not seem to be resolving the eczema. And the majority of them are saying that it's not actually effective. And so what happens is that ultimately, it's like you either end up using like more and more of it more and more frequently, or you have to use a higher and higher potency. And with that, then comes some of these side effects of using topical steroids, right? So I took this information. It's not coming from me. It's actually from this book written by 𝗪𝗧𝗪. Is called the Endocrine and Metabolic Drugs, and in that they actually list a whole list of side effects, which can be divided into local side effects, which means that literally those that are affected at the site of application, so typically the skin. And then because steroids are actually absorbed into your bloodstream, and from there it can travel to other distant locations right away from the actual site where you apply the cream, then it leads to other systemic side effects. So what are some of these things? We can have a look now, okay, to see. Okay, so For the local side effects, it'll be, well, things that, are quite commonly seen, like could be like redness, bumps, it could even exacerbate presenting infections, so on and so forth. It could delay wound healing, suppress the immune response, things like easy bruising. And then one thing that is quite common would be hyper or hypopigmentation, starts to affect over long-term use, and especially if uncontrolled, like, you're not using it as per recommendations, which is typically like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Sometimes when you see that it doesn't seem to be working as well, some people might then, especially, for children, might be tempted to kind of like use it more frequently or use for longer than recommended, just to suppress or keep the symptoms at bay. And then, over time, this could lead to some of these adverse effects. For example, as I've mentioned, the pigmentation issues. And then one of the very common things that happen is this thinning of the skin. So it's kind of like, like as we age, right, our skin gets thinner and thinner. But yeah, if you have been using topical steroids for a long period of time, that could also kind of like happen prematurely, yeah. So these are some of the local side effects. And then systemic, as I've mentioned earlier, are those that happen like not at the site of application, but somewhere else in the body. And you might not think this is related, because some of these things, I mean, if you were actually experiencing them, you might not even relate it to the fact that you're using the steroid creams, because they seem like so disconnected. But just to highlight to you that if you are presenting with such issues, that this actually could be what is happening with you. So for example, you could experience things that has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary. So it's like all these are like basically hormonal issues. For example, also like diabetes could be a side effect. Even hypertension, like high blood pressure is like, if you are suffering from it, especially prematurely, one thing to think about is like, have you in the past, or maybe even currently, been using a lot of steroids, either on your skin or maybe even internally. And then osteoporosis apparently has also been linked to the weakening of bones. And the last one here I just want to point out is this condition called topical steroid withdrawal syndrome, right? Or it's quite commonly known as steroid addiction, or then steroid withdrawal. So what I wanted to point out about this particular condition is, typically what's happened is that people have been using the steroid creams for a while, and then either it's not proven to be very effective, so they kind of like just decide to stop using it, or maybe try something more natural, or they like start doing a little bit of research on it, and then realize, oh yeah, there are some of these side effects that I've just mentioned, and then like decide to like wean themselves off it. Or sometimes it could even happen without a conscious decision made, and it could just happen in between treatment cycles. Yeah. So what is this? So yeah, so as you can see here, this was taken off the website. Some people who were very brave to share their own personal stories on this website called the International Topical Steroid Awareness Network. These are pictures that people have uploaded of themselves when they tried to stop using the steroid. So it's caused by actually the steroid withdrawal. So this is not the eczema, but rather in fact, when they were using the steroid, the skin was actually clearer, because the steroids was working to a certain extent. But when they stopped using the steroids, this was actually what happened. Like they had like this massive breakouts and stuff. And basically, it's like the body is just reacting from not getting that steroids. So I would say, like it, like when you start going down that path, these are some of the things to think about, right? Like how effective is this thing potentially going to be, and are there any side effects to using it? And like the irony of steroids is that even if you decide to stop using it, you might have to also then go through this period of withdrawal, where you might experience certain symptoms as well. And you know, for some of these people, it could go on for months, this whole period of withdrawals, where they have all these skin issues before the skin slowly starts to clear up again. So you know, it's like, what I would just want to say is, like, before you go down that path, so like maybe you should just take a step back and consider, okay, like, you know, as effective as it potentially could be, like, are there any other things that I could, you know, maybe try first before I go down that route, right? Whilst there is a place for it, like, but, you know, maybe I should just look around and see if I could do something like, you know, more natural and maybe less side effects first, yeah, and see if that works. So maybe if it works, I do not even have to go down that, you know, that route of using topical steroids. And, you know, if I've tried everything under the sun and it still does not work, then okay, you know, then maybe I want to kind of like revisit, like, you know, that path, right? So on that note, like, oh, sorry, I should point out also, sometimes, yeah, the reaction, sorry, to using the steroid cream is not just the steroid itself, but, you know, kind of like what other things go into the manufacture of these steroid creams. So there are some of these, like, sort of like the other ingredients, like for example, like your parabens, right? So sometimes you know, the reaction, the side effects to the cream could be is not from the steroids itself, but it could be some of these other chemicals that are being used on it. And especially, you know, you must think about it in the case of, you know, the fact that you're already compromised. Like, if you do suffer from eczema, it's not like somebody with, like, you know, healthy problem-free skin, where, you know, some of these, like, chemicals in small amounts might not really affect you, because your skin, like, you know, with eczema, is already inflamed, it's already very sensitive. So, you know, putting more of these chemicals onto that sort of skin could really, you know, kind of like make it worse. Yeah, so these are some of the things that could actually be happening in addition to the steroids. So which is why I thought, okay, so I just wanted to kind of like point out what are some alternatives, okay, to the use of the steroids. So remember, I come back to these principles of naturopathic medicine, and that first principle, remember, I did mention, like, in the very least, try to do no harm, right? So whatever remedy you are seeking, I would say that, you know, consider, like, you know, something that is, like, more natural and, like, less likely to cause harm, right? So some of these things have been shared with me, you know, just some of it is proven, you know, is researched heavily. Some of it could be, like, you know, sort of like home traditional remedies. And I've also had patients who shared with me that, oh, you know, they tried this and that on their children, and it seems to, you know, work. And I would say that with eczema, right, it is quite impossible to be cured of it completely. Rather, it is about managing the symptoms and trying to keep it at bay. So the thing is that, yes, if you put in that effort, right, and, you know, try a few of these things, I would say majority of the time they can actually be managed quite well. So I think that is, like, one of the things that you need to think about, you know, rather than, like, you know, like looking for a cure-all, like an instant fix, but rather, like, you know, looking for something that could, you know, just resolve the issue for majority of the time. And then you need to look at beyond that the topical application, beyond the skin, right? What else is actually happening inside the body to kind of like make that eczema worse? So that I'll talk about that later, right? So what I'm trying to say is that it has to be, like, sort of this, like, complete holistic approach, right? So the skin side of things is, like, yeah, if possible, try to go with something more natural, so that at least you're not putting more chemicals into the body that the body kind of has to work through as well. Yeah. So some of these things could be like apple cider vinegar, colloidal oatmeal. So what I wanted to point out here is that, for example, yeah, my mom, like, she buys quite a few of these things from Aveeno for my daughter, as I've mentioned earlier, who does have sorry. Who does have eczema, and, you know, we have to try to keep it at bay. So some of these Aveeno products are quite useful and readily available. But I wanted to point out, like, you know, if you were looking to get one of these oatmeal type products, that it should be something, as you can see here, that is 100% colloidal oatmeal, right? So try not to get something that is like, oh, just half filled with oatmeal, and then the rest of the ingredients are again like a whole list of chemical sounding names that you don't really recognize, right? So for example, this one from Aveeno is, as you can see here, is 100% natural colloidal oatmeal, and it is a bath that is moisturizing and kind of like soothing to the skin. So very effective, especially when you have like an actual active inflammation. Okay, so other things that you can consider using would be coconut oil, aloe vera gel, and I would say for the aloe vera gel, it is best if you just buy that fresh plant, and like you have that gel, and then you can just apply it straight onto the skin. It's very cooling, it's very healing, very soothing, right? Yeah. And then witch hazel is more for your VP type eczema, where there's a lot of pus going on, and that witch hazel, because it's astringent, right? So it kind of like just like dries things up, so that like especially in the parts of the body that comes into contact with clothes, it's not so uncomfortable. Like it doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I've also had skin rashes before where it's open wounds, and it's kind of like it sticks to the clothes, and then when you try to take off your clothes, it kind of like peels off that first layer of the skin that's just starting to heal. So really, it's actually quite nasty. And witch hazel is one of those ways that you can kind of like quickly dry up, with weepy open spots. Yeah. And then yeah, honey has been said to also be helpful. And I wanted to point out here, okay, this is very specific for itch. Yeah, so if you're experiencing very itchy eczema, chickweed. So I remember in my naturopathic training, this was back in Australia, as part of herbal medicine, we even have to make our own herbal remedy. So it could be like a tincture that you actually ingest. It could be like a salve or like a cream that you make up using fresh herbs, and then you mix in with your beeswax, with your vitamin E, and come up with like a topical salve or cream, right? This one I saw chickweed salve is very specific for itch. Yeah, so not just for eczema, but think of like any condition that's itchy, for example, even insect bites. It could be one of these things that's quite useful to just have at home, so that especially with kids, anytime that they itch, because the thing with kids, right, is that they cannot control themselves. As adults, I think even if our skin is itchy, we do not want to kind of like scratch until it's like all raw and sore, right? So for us, we kind of like, still tahan, right? We can kind of hold back. But with kids, unfortunately, it's instinctive. It's itchy, I scratch, especially at night, they cannot control themselves, especially when they are asleep. So something like that, the chickweed could be quite useful in cases where you have an active eczema happening. Yeah. Okay, so these are some of the things I wanted to highlight. And then I just wanted to show you something that we swear by at home, and I always have this. So that is the 𝗪𝗪𝗪 here. Yeah. So yeah, if you are my friend, if you're my client, you would know that I swear by the 𝗪𝗪𝗪, not just me, my whole family. So what it is a topical application of silver. So silver is actually a broad spectrum antimicrobial, and this one being in a gel form. So I'll just remove this for a while to show you. Okay, so I kind of have it here, right? The 𝗪𝗪𝗪 gel, and literally, as I can't tell if you can see, but it's like a clear gel like this. Yeah, can you see? And you know what? This is so safe that I can even eat it. So how good is this, right? And it works wonderfully for any kind of skin type issues. So especially with infectious things like cuts, burns, abrasions. I've recommended it and have really, really very good testimonials of people who have like just healed immediately. And do you see me eating it? So yes, it is that safe that you can even eat it. You would never think to eat your steroid creams, right? But this is something that not only is it effective, yeah, you can actually, it's so safe and free of side effects. Yeah. So I'm just going to bring back the presentation. And I wanted to share with you Okay, sorry, I should go back and just point out some of these things because especially now as well, with COVID-19 still very much around, the 𝗪𝗪𝗡 can also be used as a skin sanitizer. So you can actually apply a very thin layer of it on your hands to, especially kids, right, to make sure that, you don't get infection. Especially for young children, they like to put their hands in their mouths. It is odorless, it is non-greasy, it's like gel form, so it doesn't sting and burn for yourself or your kids. Sometimes, when you put on certain things, they kind of like, get very hot and inflamed, but not with this. It's completely cooling. And you can see there that is actually a patented technology which has been clinically proven, right, to be antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. So very good for also fungal infections, around the toes, those areas of our skin that is hard to reach. And yes, definitely it helps to accelerate skin healing, which is what I wanted to point out in the next few slides. Very specific to eczema, as you can see here, this is a young child with like that sort of like dry kind of like eczema. And you can see just within 2 weeks, right, of application of the 𝗪𝗪𝗡 gel, that from, being very red and inflamed, that it has kind of like, really, the inflammation has really gone down, the redness, the swelling, the bumps has really improved, right? And this is just within 2 weeks of something that is so I would say harmless, yeah? And then not just for young children, but adults, and of course, for the elderly as well. So as you can see here, in this case, it's a weepy, the wet kind of eczema that we were talking about earlier. And this is a lady in her 60s, 65. So, with as we age, right, our skin just does not heal as well. In fact, it gets like slower and slower when it comes to wound healing. So as you can see here, again, like, very quickly, in fact, this, like, on the first day, as you can see, is like really red, open sores, red and weepy. And then just after 9 days, I mean, this is like just amazing. See how much it has improved, right? 95% recovered here. So yeah, you can kind of like see that it doesn't work for just your dry, but also the wet, weepy kind to really quickly heal wounds, yeah? And then for those of you who are my own personal friends, or like my father's Facebook friend, Uncle Tony's Facebook friend, right? Y'all will also know, I often say, my father, like, he really swears by 𝗪𝗪𝗡, right? So how I know about 𝗪𝗪𝗡 is because I worked for this place called 𝗪𝗧𝗙𝗙 10 years ago, and this was one of the products that the product side of the company brought in from the US. And ever since then, our family has just like never been without it. There's always a bottle of it at home. And my dad, like, he was 66 years old when he actually had this fall. He's 71 now. I often say the way he talks about 𝗪𝗪𝗡, right, is as if he has shares in the company. Like, he really, like, this is his Facebook. He actually posted this himself. So what happened was that they had gone to Hong Kong, and then they were walking, like, walking at the peak. And then he kind of like fell and like had this like really nasty gash on his face, as you can see, right? And 66 years old at the time, like, with a history of diabetes, how the skin, doesn't heal as well when you have diabetes. But as you can see again here, within weeks, right? And he was saying here that, it's like just 3 weeks to complete recovery. So you can see it doesn't work just for eczema, it works for any kind of cuts, wounds, burns, so on and so forth. Yeah, so you can see, I mean, like, even for the elderly, it heals really, really well. So then on that note, I wanted to bring on my ex-colleague and very good friend, Charlene. So she is the BDM of this company called ABL, which brings in 𝗪𝗪𝗡 and also some of the other products that I'll talk about when it comes to internally the high-potency probiotics. So I'll just add her now to the show. Okay. Hi, Charlene.
Hi, Tiff.
Okay, hang on. I'm just going to bring down the presentation so that, we can see you nice and big. Okay, so I mean, I've just been sharing a lot about, using, for eczema, the difference between using a steroid cream versus the 𝗪𝗪𝗡, and shown like just a few examples of how well it has worked. Perhaps you could share with us, because you guys are the distributors, you've kind of like have 10 over years of experience selling this product, like what are some of the other interesting things that you might have come across?
In most cases, when people come to us seeking help or assistance, are usually where they are at the worst case scenario. So where they have very huge gaping wounds, or they have infected wounds that is really past building. Maybe I just give you a little light up of so how have we all expanded the 𝗪𝗀𝗧 in Singapore? So in the past, 10 years back, 𝗪𝗪𝗧𝗛 technology was actually brought into Singapore, and we started off with clinics, hospitals. So we sell it through 𝗪𝗪𝗡𝗘𝗟𝗙. We sell the medical grade version, which is called 𝗪𝗚𝗡. So we started selling it to the hospices, where patients have very big diabetic ulcers or bed sores that is perhaps incurable at that stage, because it was like 15 cm big, and then
oh my god, 15 cm.
Yeah, it was very, very big, gaping wounds. And a lot of them are really like towards the last phase of their life, and so to prevent it from getting further inflammation, or to make it worse and make it less painful for the patient, so all the wound nurses actually went out, with the care set, and then they would start applying and trialing on these elderly, because it was so safe that you can actually use it on very fragile skin. Then they start seeing a lot of healing process within 6 weeks, 14 weeks. We still see the wounds start healing very well. So we decided to, hey, why not? We bring it to the new range, which is called the 𝗪𝗀𝗧𝗛 in Singapore. So with 𝗪𝗀𝗧𝗛, we started off marketing it through the Guardian pharmacies, and then we sell it through wound nurses who visit homes, that have patients that are unable to afford the expensive care set. And we start to see a lot of people having eczema cases coming to us. Their wounds are so weak. There are some patients with 60% of their skin surface all covered with witty eczema. And at that point of time, the nurses didn't know what to do, except to cleanse the wound and to make sure that it's not leaving too much, to start wrapping up the wound.
You're talking about eczema here, right?
Yes, eczema. So
it's really so bad until they have to be like bandaged, you mean?
Correct. Because they start staining all their clothes on their beds, and then when it's dry, when they wake up in the morning, the skin tears.
That's exactly what I experienced. I mean, not with eczema, but with like a rash previously. Like, it's just started to heal, and then like you have to remove your clothes, and with it comes that layer. So it's like a vicious cycle. Like there's no way for the skin to heal unless you go naked all the time, which is impossible, right?
Correct. So when they were given all a tube of 𝗪𝗀𝗧𝗛, the wound nurses, so they start applying onto the wound for the patients and things like that. And instead of wrapping it up, so they let air a little bit more. Very soon, you see within 2 weeks, the skin closed up very nicely. There's no whipping. In fact, a new layer of skin came up upon it. And it's where no more scratching and things like that. So I would have to say that because of all this past experience, and I was also an eczema patient, I had it so badly on my finger that I can't shake hands with people because it's always wet and sticky.
So yeah, quite right there. I mean, as I say, right, it's one of these things that I do see people for, and exactly, when they first come to see me, it's like, I want to shake their hands. Well, this is before COVID anyway. And they're like, oh, Tiffany, I'm sorry. Like, like even on the palms, like, it's like actually open wounds on the palms. And they're saying like, I'm so sorry, I can't shake your hand because look at them. And then like, of course, like within a month or so of using 𝗪𝗀𝗧𝗛, of, treating the interior, it's like, it's completely healed over.
So what happened is that I was given a lot of corticosteroids, and I became immune to it. My body formed a resistance. So it doesn't work anymore for me since I've been using it since I was like 14 years old.
Oh my god, okay.
Yeah. So on and off, I keep having it, but then nobody says that it's because of a certain condition or certain things that I use or what I take. So that's why I try and error. So coming across 𝗦𝗪𝗡 in my company, I was like, whoa, God, you're gonna save me now. I start applying, and so I do have a certain protection that I use for myself. Because I am unable to use traditional hand soap. So soap that I find outside in the toilet or in the office toilets or anywhere else, I can't use it. So I had to change, my whole lifestyle. I had to change everything else. I can't drink dairy milk.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah. So these are the ones that incubating and work. So it spread very fast, and it was bad. Keep rubbing my head like this. So 𝗦𝗪𝗡 actually helped me a lot because every 4 hours, once I applied it, I leave it to dry, and I put in a very nice layer of moisturizer.
Yeah.
And I shower in cool water.
Okay. Yeah.
So
actually, you're right, because on this note, right, I kind of happened to speak to a few people, and they were saying that at first they didn't have, like, the eczema was actually under control, but then recently with COVID, right, because like they keep having to use sanitizers, and then I mean they kind of like didn't link it, and they started using sanitizers, right, and then actually that sanitizer kind of brought on the eczema like attack. So then so what you're trying to say is that we can, like, for people who are suffering from eczema, instead of using the usual sanitizers, we can actually use this 𝗦𝗪𝗡 as a sanitizer as well, without the side effects, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So
okay.
IPA that is in hand sanitizers, these are the ones that dry our hands very badly. What's like the itchy starts. And that's where you start rubbing and causing, the wound to turn bigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
yeah. Okay.
𝗦𝗪𝗡 can be used as a antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. At the same time, it can also be used as a first aid gel.
Yes. Yeah. I actually recommended it, the wound care one, for somebody who had like literally very bad burns. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember, but I sent you the photo. She was so thrilled when it healed completely. She was a chef, and then got burned by scalded by hot water. And then she was saying that she was so worried, right, that because it's like on her hands and it's very visible, and then for us like girls, it's like, oh my God, it's something that we have to live with. So when it healed so nicely, and it's like almost like you can't see where the burn was, she was like so thrilled, because it's like I said, like a lot of it has to, when it comes to skin, it starts to affect mentally and emotionally. So yeah, the fact that it helps to heal things like the skin so well is really a godsend.
Yeah, it's definitely a godsend. Yeah, but I do have cases with my improper care, even after using clover. The wound doesn't heal as fast. Partly because after long-term use of PPS, the skin no longer produce a layer of barrier.
Yeah.
So the correct way is to use 𝗦𝗪𝗡 as anti-inflammatory, and then a layer of moisturizer, so it keeps the skin soft and not drying out too much. I think the correct moisturizer is also a bit important too.
Yeah. So yeah, on that note, I know you also sell a range of skincare products for especially young children and babies. This 𝗦𝗪𝗡, which I know that you say when you use in combination the right moisturizer and then with the 𝗦𝗪𝗡 to heal, it works really well together for young children, right?
It took me a while to source for a product that is moisturizing enough. I have used a lot of brands, QV, Aberdeen. I have tried, even B-Safe and things like that. So the problem is that it doesn't retain, especially in Singapore where it's so humid. This becomes too oily for me.
Yes.
So I have to keep finding products, in order to replace, what I have at home. So this is article.
Okay.
So I think for my youngest child as well, because it is very clean, so you know it doesn't have all the nasty pillars and precipitating and things like that. So and my son totally loves this. So my son actually has eczema too. My both sons, they actually had
because usually it runs in the family, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think kids, when they do it correctly at the start, they will go away as they grow older. Because they set correct protocols, what they should be doing, what they should not be doing, and that's where you know it prevents the flare-ups as much as possible. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So thank you for sharing. So yes, on that note, I'll let Cherlyn go, and that is where exactly now I'm going to talk about, like, you know, beyond the surface of the skin. What are some things that you can do internally also to make sure that you know, you keep your eczema at bay. So thank you for sharing with us, Cherlyn. Yeah. Okay. See you. Bye bye. Okay, so on that note, I'm just gonna come back to the presentation. So yes, as you remember, I often say that, you know, healing has to be holistic. It has to be, you know, not just beyond the actual symptoms, but look at treating the root cause. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight once again here that, you know, as a naturopath, we, beyond the actual disease on the surface, what are some of these underlying imbalances in your body, for example, inflammation, immune system challenges that are actually contributing to that. So even with something like eczema, with a skin condition, it is very important to look at some of these underlying issues. And this word I'm going to show, that I'm going to point out here is this leaky gut condition, which actually, if you start looking into like natural treatments for eczema and also some of these other conditions that you see here, from rheumatoid arthritis to even mood issues, right? A lot of it now we know is actually linked to this condition called the leaky gut syndrome, which beyond the intestines, right? It actually, as you can see here, affects your whole body in a myriad of different ways. Yeah. So, for example, yes, as we've mentioned, when it comes to the skin, it could present as acne, eczema, psoriasis. It can even affect your immune system, and then that presents as you know, kind of like frequent respiratory type conditions. It can even because if your lining of your intestine is compromised, actually people might not realize that 80% of our immune system and of the neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, dopamine, are actually produced in the gut, that it could also result in, you know, things like depression, anxiety. It could affect you know, cognitive function. So a lot of the times, all of these things which might not seem related to the intestines or your digestive health could actually improve when you start looking at how you can treat leaky gut. So how does it actually progress? So, like, what are some things that could actually have contributed to this condition, that, you know, you have the leaky gut, which eventually results in, you know, in your case, perhaps eczema. So, for example, you know, kind of like through diet, through lifestyle, we come into contact with, you know, a host of these factors, these things that basically contribute to inflammation in the whole body, right? So we're talking about like widespread systemic inflammation. So things like stress, toxins, you know, environmental toxins, food particles. So later I'll be talking about what are some foods that seems to, you know, kind of like make eczema worse. Certain kind of drugs, for example, definitely, well, steroids, yes, and also your antibiotics is known to actually contribute to leaky gut pathogens, and then of course organ malfunction. So these things kind of like, as you know, kind of like increases inflammation in the body, including in the gastrointestinal or GI tract. So if you think about it, right, what is actually happening when we eat food is that it is meant to, you know, like from the mouth, it goes down to the stomach, the esophagus, down to the stomach, then the small intestines, large intestines, and then well out the other way. It's like a pipe, right? and there's no part of this like tract, this pipe, that is meant to like filter out to other parts of the body other than when it reaches the small intestines, and then the food gets, you know, converted into actual nutrients. So when you think about it, right, the body does not even recognize things like the actual foods that we eat, right? It has to be converted into nutrients. And then in the intestinal lining, there are these tight junctions where then as a nutrient, it will actually open up this kind of like this lock and key system. And then because it is a nutrient that the body recognizes, between each of these intestinal cells that you can see here, it will open up a small little gap such that the nutrient can pass through, right? And that should be the correct way that the digestive tract should work. But what happens is that if you have a lot of this inflammation, you know, these particles, so-called foreign particles coming into the body, then what happens is that you know, these tight junctions actually open up a little, and then from there you actually, you know, allow these sort of like toxins, this sort of like food particles to kind of like enter into your body when it's not meant to, like into other parts of the body. And because these are substances that the body does not actually recognize, it is seen as a foreign substance, right? The body will actually mount an immune response to kind of like counteract it, right? And then this kind of like starts this cascade of basically immune system challenges. And depending on how severe the condition is, you know, it will start to manifest as some of these conditions that we said earlier. Like, you know, it might start with just a digestive complaint, and then from there, you know, it starts to peter on into other parts of the body. For example, you know, respiratory issues because your immune system is challenged, or, you know, affects the skin because, well, yeah, it's like the skin is actually our largest organ for detoxification. So, you know, if internally it's starting to go awry, if it's out of balance, it starts to push things out through the skin. So, you know, in a variety of ways, leaky gut is like really beyond just the intestinal issues to, you know, even get to a point where your immune system kind of like starts to attack itself, and you present with like autoimmune conditions. So things like lupus, things like, you know, rheumatoid arthritis, vitiligo, like these things ultimately, you know, is all linked back to our gut, to the gut health. Yeah. So when it comes to eczema, it is definitely very important to look at healing this leaky gut issue that you probably are presenting with. Yeah. So as we can see here, this is what I was saying, like, you know, when there's lots of inflammation going on, you know, this little gap starts to happen, to develop between each of our intestinal cells, allowing for, you know, particles like drug particles, toxins, gluten to enter our bloodstream, and then from there, you know, create a whole cascade of different immune challenges. Yeah. So okay, so how are some of these ways that we can actually heal from leaky gut if we, you know, want a more complete, a more long-term resolution to eczema, right? Beyond just applying the moisturizers, beyond applying the healing creams and stuff, right? So the first thing I would say is step one is to remove, right? Like stop the things that are actually attacking the body first, right? So this could be some of these problem foods, it could be environmental toxins, and even like, you know, the kind of like mental, emotional stress that you put on yourself that is causing the inflammation. Then the next would be to replace, right? Okay, so it's not just about removing like all this so-called offenders, but like what are some things then that you can use, that you can eat to actually pitch the advantage towards yourself in terms of healing from leaky gut and then in turn eczema. So on that note, I'll talk about foods, but I just wanted to say then after that we'll talk about, you know, after you have kind of like improved on the diet and lifestyle part, what are some things that you can do to then repair the intestinal damage and also repopulate the gut bacteria inside. Okay, so but first we'll talk about diet and lifestyle. So as you can see here, I put a picture of these kids enjoying a pizza, and I would say for, you know, kids with eczema, this is about one of the worst things that you can actually give them. Once in a while, you know, if their eczema is like, you know, under control, as a once in a while occasional treat, yes, maybe, but not something that you would want to be like giving your kids on a very regular basis. So let me share with you why. Okay, so the first thing to do is to remove some of these triggers, yeah, from our diet, and how that could actually help. So if you know, yeah, if you are suffering from eczema, these foods that you see here, from your gluten, your refined, you know, flours, to nuts, and then seafood, oranges, as you can see here, peanuts, dairy, and we're talking about cow's milk dairy, certain spices, and even soy milk, yeah, are some of the things that you might want to consider removing from your diet, okay, especially during a time of active infection, yeah. Okay, so these are, I would say, very common, but if it is not possible to kind of like stop eating all of these things at once, usually when clients come to see me, I would say the first or the top 3 things that you might want to really hone in on are these following things, right? The top 3. So I would say the first thing to remove is always your cow's milk dairy, okay? So it is very inflammatory, especially when it's pasteurized or homogenized, which is the sort of dairy that we get here in Singapore. You know, if you're talking about, if you live in a country where, you know, raw milk is available, it might not be so bad, but if you're having an active infection, I would say still it's not something you want to take on a regular basis, okay? The other thing with cow's milk is that it actually contains large protein molecules that are difficult to digest. So anything that kind of places a further strain on your intestinal health, right? You might want to, like, you know, just hold off. And ultimately, like, together, because it's inflammatory, because it's hard to digest, it does contribute to leaky gut, right? And like for Thea, my older daughter who has eczema, you know, very early on when I switched her out from breast milk to like a formula, right? When we realized straight away that, you know, like the moment we gave her the cow's milk formula, it seems to trigger the eczema, right? She started to have breakouts on her face. Then what we very quickly did was to switch her to a goat's milk formula, and hey, that seems to be okay. She actually tolerated it very well. Like, we changed her to carry home. And one of the reasons this could be so is because goat's milk, for one, is actually alkaline and not acidifying in the body, so it's less inflammatory. The other reason is also because it contains less of this casein that actually causes this inflammation in the body when it comes to cow's milk. So that could be one of the things that you might want to consider, like switching from cow's milk to goat's milk. Unfortunately, some children, some people also cannot tolerate goat's milk. Then you might have to, you know, really consider some of these non-dairy type milks. And, you know, here you can see a whole array of different ones. And I would say, like, you know, sometimes when I tell people that, oh, you know, like, you might want to like stop taking the cow's milk dairy, I have a lot of parents actually freaking out, because it's almost like, but my kid needs their milk, how can they not drink milk, right? And I would say, really honestly, beyond age, the first year, right? If your kids are starting to eat solid foods, especially if you are taking like a good supplements, good quality supplements, there is really not that necessity to drink cow's milk and lots of formula, because you are getting your nutrients from your other food sources, right? So it is actually a myth, I would say, to think that your child needs to drink lots and lots of cow's milk, you know, to kind of like to grow, right, and thrive. You can actually get your nutrients in other ways, especially if your child presents with eczema, right, that you really want to consider alternatives, yeah? So as you can see here, there's a wide variety of different milks as listed there, like the coconut, walnut, rice milk, almond milk, which is of course very popular these days, soy milk, I think that's hazelnut milk, and then oat milk, yeah? So the thing is that some of these parents, when, you know, if their kids have eczema or some issue related to, you know, allergies when it comes to cow's milk or even like sheep's or goat's milk, then the first thing that some of them might try to switch to is your soy milk, yeah? But let me share with you that, as we've mentioned earlier, soy is a very typical allergen as well when it comes to people with eczema. So I would say that might not be the best option for you. So if you can see here, I've kind of like put little hearts on the 3 milks, which I would say is generally safer when it comes to people with eczema. What are some of these milks that you can kind of enjoy more liberally? Would be your coconut, your rice, and then your oat milk. The reason is because soy and unfortunately the nuts, as we've mentioned earlier, are typical allergens as well that could actually either bring on the actual eczema, or if not, kind of like increases the seriousness, the severity of it, or it could actually bring about a flare. So I would say, if possible, really try to keep to like your grain or your coconut. So coconut is safe even for people with nut allergies because it is actually considered a fruit, not a nut. Yeah, so very few people are actually allergic to coconut in that sense. Yeah, when it comes to skin conditions. Okay. And then beyond cow's milk dairy, the second thing I quite often tell people to avoid when it comes to eczema is gluten. And of course, from gluten, you have then, all your different breads and pastas, kind of like your cups that are then filled with this gluten type grains, which are wheat, very common, right? Barley, rye, kamut, and spelt. Because again, these either, make eczema worse, or it triggers flare-ups. And the reason is because there's this particular doctor who has found, he discovered that there is that particular protein called gliadin in gluten that actually increases the leakiness of the gut, right? So remember earlier we said that leaky gut is probably the root cause of eczema. So you definitely do not want, to be eating lots of things that actually make your gut even more leaky, that makes the intestinal lining more permeable. So especially during an active period when you're trying to clear it up, right? So you want to avoid these things. So I would say the main ones would be wheat, rye, barley, and these are some of the products that they are quite commonly found in, yeah? I would also point out the hidden sources of gluten, like things that are not obvious, even if you're avoiding like your pastas, your breads that are, gluten type breads, right? Be very careful because they can actually lurk in things even like processed meats, in soups, especially those thickened with flour, salad dressings and marinades, and even potato chips. You'll be surprised, but a lot of them actually contain seasonings that are actually filled with gluten. Yeah, so these are some things to look out for. And then you might think like, oh my god, then what's there left for me to eat? So that's an entirely different topic, but previously I actually did another live show on gluten, so you might want to look at that particular episode to watch that episode if you have not done so. But these are, as you can see here, a range of different grains that are then gluten-free. And thankfully in Asia, right, rice, as you can see here, is gluten-free, is easily found, in a lot of our products like your bihun, your 𝗦𝗘𝗟𝗙. And then of course there are people out there, one of which is like, one of my very good friends as well, baconing. So here is like, if you remember, right, they have this like some of these like flours, like coconut flour type products, which might be quite safe to use. And then like things like quinoa and teff, corn, these are some of your like gluten-free products that you can kind of like use, especially for kids, right? Especially for Thea, I always go to the supermarkets nowadays, like, any I would say decent supermarket, you'll be able to find like a whole range of gluten-free snacks, pastas that, you can kind of like incorporate into the diet, yeah? And then one of the top ones I would want to point out, even though it's not in those typical food allergens, is sugar, especially with kids, right? And sugar, of course, we're talking about anything that breaks down easily into sugar as well. So like your refined carbs, right? Why? Is because sugar, whilst it's not an allergen in itself, it is very inflammatory. It also feeds this particular yeast in the gut called Candida, right? And it's actually been found that candida is not something that you can get rid of completely, but so in small amounts, it actually doesn't really, kind of like, it's not a big concern. But when there's a candida overgrowth, when you feed it lots of sugar, right, it can actually overproduce, and then can actually contribute to a leaky gut when you don't have that right balance of gut flora. So in fact, a survey showed that 70% of patients with eczema actually are shown to have an overgrowth of candida. So one of the protocols that you might want to consider when it comes to treating eczema is to also then go on an anti-candida diet for 3 weeks to just, kind of like kill the majority of the candida and keep them at a, a low level, yeah? Okay, so that's, I would say that these are the top 3 things, like your cow's milk dairy, gluten, and also sugar might be the first step, when it comes to improving the diet, yeah. And then, even for myself as a naturopath, there were years that I've cut out a lot of those things that was afflicting Thea, and then also for many years I shared with my clients to avoid those things I've already mentioned. And then the feedback that came back to me would be like, yeah, the improvement seems to be kind of 80%, like the child's from big weepy wounds, right, has kind of healed, but there's still a little bit of redness, a bit of soreness, there's still room for improvement, basically, that there are still it's not completely resolved. And then later on, I came across Karen Fisher's book called The Eczema Diet, and was introduced to the concept of this itchy dozen, right? So like you might have heard of the dirty dozen, and then basically this is the itchy dozen, this list of foods which are also commonly linked to actually increasing itchiness, especially for your eczema prone kids. And I was very surprised, especially when you look at this list, right? And I actually cringed because a lot of these things were things that we gave Thea kind of on a very regular basis, thinking, of course, that they are healthy. And they are healthy because if you look at this list, a lot of them are actually your, nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables. So things like broccoli, things like tomatoes, even avocados, how good are avocados, right? And to think that, these things were unfortunately oh my God, grapes, were unfortunately actually contributing to the itchiness and the discomfort for Thea. I was like, oh my God, what have we done? So why are these things which are seemingly healthy things making eczema worse? So unfortunately, even in nature, right, there are certain chemicals present in different groups of fruits and vegetables that unfortunately triggers itch. And there are things like, as you can see here, salicylates, amines, MSG. We're talking about even natural, okay, there are natural forms of MSG that are found in fruits and vegetables. And then, okay, sulfites, nitrates are things more associated with deli meats, so they're more processed foods. But the top 3, the first 3, the salicylates, amines, and MSG, they are actually nutrients, they're actually found in health promoting foods typically. Unfortunately, if you suffer from eczema, if your child suffers from eczema, these are the very foods that could be making your condition worse, and you definitely want to consider keeping them to a minimal. So that's why I come back to the pizza. In that pizza you have your wheat, you have your cheese, which is dairy, you might have your pepperoni, your ham, which are your deli meats, you have your tomato sauce, so can you see in just that one meal alone how many of these eczema promoting foods are you eating? So yeah, that might be something you wanna think about, right? Okay, so coming back to this, what are some other things that actually contribute, right, beyond the foods? We talk about stress, we talk about toxins, we talk about drugs. So these are certain other lifestyle modifications beyond foods, right? That could actually help to improve your eczema condition. So things like, a little bit of exercise helps to reduce inflammation in the body, making sure that you keep your stress levels at bay, ensuring that you get a good number of hours of sleep per night, just helps to taper down the production of cortisol, which is very inflammatory. Alcohol, especially, is very it actually can increase leaky gut because of all the inflammation that it causes. And unfortunately, even some of these over-the-counter type medications, these are some things that has been linked to contributing to leaky gut. So you might want to consider alternatives to them, okay? All right, then the second step is, okay, once you've removed all the triggers, right, what are some things that you can then increase the intake of to ensure that your gut heals as quickly as it can? So as you can see here, this little kid, I say, to replace with healing foods, and what he's really eating is broth, right? So your bone broth. So these are some of these foods that actually can enhance the healing of a leaky gut, either because they contain ingredients that reduce inflammation, or they actually, like in the case of bone broth, actually provides the actual nutrients that helps to rebuild that gut lining. If there's lots of holes and stuff, it provides the collagen and other nutrients. So on this note, I would just say that what I'm sharing today is kind of like very broad spectrum. Of course, if you are suffering from eczema, I would say to consider coming to see somebody like myself, a naturopath, who can work with you then on a very individual level, based on your culture, your ethnicity, your age group. What are some things we can do it. What I do is that I actually look at your diet diary, and I work with you to kind of fine tune what are some things that you can further do to kind of improve on your diet further, so that you see results as quickly as possible. We do not want it to be like a long drawn out process in terms of healing, right? You kind of want to do make a concerted effort, take some good quality supplements at the same time, really clean out your diet, put in lots of gut healing foods, and then you will see the improvement within a month or two, and that then kind of brings your body back to a healthier level of homeostasis, and then you can kind of just try to maintain it with more lifestyle type measures. So these are some of the foods that you can consider. And then there are also, as I've mentioned, certain diets that you can embark on to also help heal a leaky gut. I've already mentioned a gluten-free diet. There is this particular diet called the low FODMAP diet as well, because it's been found that certain kinds of carbohydrates also seems to irritate the gut, right? So that's a completely different protocol. Again, there's the paleo diet, because it actually removes a lot of your processed foods. There's fasting, elemental diet. So what I would say is that exactly because there are so many kind of dietary strategies, right? Which is the one that really works for you? And instead of kind of just try and error this and that, it is you could come to work with me like myself. I might, send you to do a food allergy test, or maybe a hair mineral tissue test. It could be that you're lacking certain nutrients. And then in this concerted effort, we kind of instead of just trying to find a needle in a haystack, right? Really make a very concerted effort in looking at your personal health history to see which, strategy will work probably most quickly, most beneficially for you. So then, beyond the diet and lifestyle, then of course, as a naturopath, we do use good quality, high potency type supplements. And why this is important is because we've talked about, when it comes to healing the leaky gut, step 3 is to very quickly repair the damage that's already happened, right? So that you're not constantly, still being bombarded by the onslaught of things that are coming into the body. Because what happens is that if if your gut is leaky, you are in a state where you're hypersensitive, you're overreacting to whatever comes into the body. And once your gut actually heals, you might be able to tolerate a lot of these things that come in without kind of overreacting in the form of an eczema flare-up. You might be able to eat little things that you enjoy from time to time without kind of paying the price. So it is important to repair the actual lining, and then also repopulate the actual gut flora in the intestines. So we talk about repairing the lining. So if you think about it as a pipe, right? You kind of want to repair the walls of the pipe so the things are not actually gushing out of it. And then on that note, so one of the products that I quite often use is this product called 𝗦𝗘𝗟𝗙𝗙 from 𝗦𝗨𝗡𝗙𝗙. It is a practitioner product. It contains, I would say the key ingredient is glutamine, which is very important for repairing the gut lining. It also contains licorice, aloe vera gel, which also helps with soothing and healing the intestinal lining. There are, of course, other nutrients that I would use in addition to this, which I'll mention just in a bit. And then beyond the actual lining, right, the pipe, then you also must make sure that you kind of like refill what's the contents that's inside the pipe to make sure that that gut flora is in a good balance. Because as we've mentioned earlier, like with candida, right, when that gut flora is out of balance is when you actually are more prone to leaky gut and eczema, right? So you want to make sure that it's working in your favor. So previously, you know, I kind of like invited Cherlyn onto the show. So her company ABL also brings in this practitioner brand called 𝗦𝗨𝗡𝗙𝗙 from Australia. Is a practitioner exclusive range of probiotics, and you would be surprised, probiotics are not created equal. There are many different ones, and different strains also work for different functions. And so like there are a few here that I would just mention. For adults, it would be like, yeah, this 𝗧𝗬𝗙𝗙, and it comes with 8 strains at a very high potency, you know, that's been kind of like proven to be beneficial for gut healing. And then I would say the challenge is for children. So for like kids, you know, I also bring in the 𝗦𝗘𝗟𝗙 probiotics. This is a chewable, so it's good to have not just for eczema, but just sort of like improving intestinal health, which peters onto, you know, kind of like brain health, which peters onto immune system health, so immune support. So I would say, you know, there's like many ways that improving your gut integrity actually improves like the rest of your overall health and well-being. And then when it comes to like little babies, right, so this particular one called Baby Flora from 𝗦𝗨𝗡𝗙𝗙, as you can see here, it provides the prebiotics and is suitable for infants from literally from birth up to 2 years of age. So, you know, if you have a baby that is suffering from eczema, in addition to, you know, using some of these topical treatments, this might be something that you want to give your baby to just ensure that, you know, all the odds are working in his or her favor. Okay, so probiotics, a high potency one, is also very important when it comes to gut healing. And you can see here, so this is one case of a 7-month-old who, you know, have been using, like, again, your cortical steroids, your topical steroids for a good period of time, and it doesn't seem to be working. And just within 6 days of taking the Baby Flora probiotics, you can see how well, you know, the skin has kind of like healed. Yeah, so yeah, this is just one of these examples of what, you know, healing from within can really do for your exterior. Okay, so beyond probiotics, some things that you want to, you know, think about to support leaky gut would be your prebiotics, L-glutamine, we've already mentioned, vitamin D, zinc, which is healing, of course, for skin as well, not just the gut lining, and also fish oils because it's anti-inflammatory, right? So on that note, I would say, like, we've kind of like, you know, covered eczema from like healing that on the surface, you know, so that at least you manage the symptoms while you start to work on the internal, the gut health. And it is through this sort of like holistic approach that you would see, you know, not you don't have to worry so much about like the side effects of using, you know, things that might have certain chemicals that could make the eczema worse, but you are really then looking at healing from within and really achieving like a long-term solution to your condition. Yeah, so on this note, I just wanted to share with you here some of my information. And you know, for those of you who are not familiar with the term naturopath, you do not really know what it means to come and see a naturopath, well, I've just introduced a discovery session. So it's basically a free 15-minute phone call with me that I can share with you, what it actually involves, my fees, and then from our chat, you can share with me a little bit about what's afflicting you. And then from there, you can kind of like decide your comfort level in terms of whether you want to move forward with the actual consultation or not, right? So this is completely obligation free, it's literally just a chat to find out my approach and how I can help you. And to do that, just drop me an email at hello@tiffanywe.com. Yeah. So that's from me today. Yeah, I think I've covered everything. But on a final note, and I just wanted to kind of like point this out. It has absolutely nothing to do with the talk today. But I was so thrilled to find out that one of my clients actually, she actually owns this company called Faith and Deeds, and it's like she actually makes all this pretty jewelry that uses like crystals, natural stones, and I just wanted to kind of like give a shout out to her. Like I'm wearing my faith like my this pretty one here, and as you can see, it's filled with like this morganite, pale pink morganite stones, which is my favorite color, right? So it's called Faith and Deeds. They do really nice things. So so this is like just one of the ways that I just wanted to give back to my clients as well. So just a shout out. So on that note, thank you everybody for watching, for joining me today, and I just want to say thank you so much, and then I'll see you when I see you. So if you wanted to have a chat with me, drop me an email, hello@tiffanywe.com. Yeah, okay, so on that note, goodbye, enjoy your Sunday.